Welcome back. We are sitting right now at a very pivotal moment, I believe, in the Biden presidency because apparently there are going to be several more executive orders that are going to be unveiled over the next week. I think Biden is supposed to make an announcement on Thursday concerning some of these measures in terms of firearms control. Again, can't use the word that most people would use because of YouTube, but it is really something that I think Americans ought to really be very, very worried about. But first, I want to let you know that the latest installment of the newsletter should be out if you're subscribed. So just keep an eye out for that. It is not entirely politically related, but obviously it's inevitable that um, you're going to be seeing some of these some of these topics really mingle, right? So my latest article really does go into this issue with Major League Baseball and how they just don't understand how people really sort of use sports in order to maybe change their opinion, but they don't want the sports to be only about society, right? And I think the best example, and this is what I really go into, is how Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball, but he didn't break it by saying, "Oh, I'm here to change the world." He did it by being just a fantastic baseball player. He also did it by being a very controlled and smart individual. He knew that being resentful, being someone who would react to every provocation, would hurt the prospect that he would succeed in Major League Baseball and help bring the experiment to a success of integrating baseball, right? And that's something that's so lacking in today's activist generation of athletes because they don't have to undergo any of the challenges that he went through. Remember, Jackie Robinson, for some of the games that he played in some of the cities that he had to play in, like St. Louis, he couldn't even travel with his teammates. He couldn't stay with his teammates in the hotels because of legal segregation in some of those places. And the idea that today we have athletes who continue to think that we're living in this society that's completely unjust, where they're second-class citizens, is absolutely laughable, right? There are people who are currently playing in the professional leagues, people like LeBron James, who unfortunately, especially unfortunately for him, but for the NBA at large, he's injured right now. And most of his money, I believe, is guaranteed with the Lakers. And it's such a huge fortune that somebody of Jackie Robinson's era could never have dreamt of it. But I do want you to read this article in its entirety. So please click on the link to the newsletter, sign up, and you'll receive articles like that and to your email. And definitely, please leave a comment and tell me what you think. Also, please subscribe to me on all of the different social media networks below: Odyssey, Subscribestar, BitChute, Rumble, Minds, and Gab. And but really, the focus of today, it's not going to be as long of a video as maybe it might deserve, but it is really going to talk about how this reflexive desire by the Biden administration to address gun violence, right? It's born out of really a twisted state of mind, okay? And don't get me wrong, there's no reason that if you're a victim of one of these incidents, like what happened in Colorado, what happened in Atlanta, that you should not be afraid of gun-toting people running around and killing innocents like the people that you lost. Traumatic incidents induce fear, but that doesn't mean that the reflex reaction of calling for more gun control is what's going to help to solve it and prevent more crimes. Because the fact of the matter is the federal government's already poor at its job, and not just the federal government, the federal, local, and state governments. They're poor at the job of prosecuting current gun crimes. People who are caught with possession of an unlawful firearm, whether they're people who have a prior conviction of a felony, or if they bought a gun illegally. And there you go. I actually said the word. So again, I'm going to be shadow banned on YouTube, but it's okay because you can still subscribe to me on BitChute and Odyssey or Rumble. Going on. So the truth is that they know that they have a window in order to try to do something, right? And I think that some of them are savvy enough to understand that it might really backfire on them because, yes, there are many judges across the land who will look at this, even judges that might not even be conservatives. They might be people who are, Obama or Clinton appointees, or even Carter. There's a few left that will say, look, you have to write a better law, right? It's not consistent with the Second Amendment. And we're just going to strike it down, whether it's an executive order or even some of the proposed legislation they have. And it's a shame because they're so convinced of the fact that they're in the right, the fact that they know the solution because they've written the studies, or they've read the studies, or they've just shared the studies on Twitter that say that you need more gun control, that they're willing to go through with a lot of these actions that ultimately, first of all, they will not reduce the number of people killed by illegal weapons, right? Because illegal weapons are, it's just like when they banned drugs. It's just like when they banned gambling. Negative human behavior, vices, criminal impulses. The law can help to sort of dissuade and deter people from doing them, but the desire never goes away. And in fact, the wherewithal to do these illegal activities never goes away. And this is definitely something where you know that there are certain people who are out there who can only do harm with a weapon because that's the sort of nature that they go by. They have either anger issues or they're involved in a criminal enterprise, and they're not using the weapon in order to defend their property or in order to go hunting or whatever other benign activity that you might think of it. So the answer to that is not to add to the laws and make it so that other people who previously had not been criminals are now having to look over their back and say, well, I bought this legally 4 or 5 years ago. What now? Why am I going to be hassled, right? And those people thinking, oh, there's going to be these mandatory buybacks, we're going to get them all back because these people are ultimately cowards. No, because non-compliance is pretty strong. There was already a high-capacity magazine ban in New York State that's been basically ignored by every single firearms owner in the state who owns one of these magazines. There's been hardly any compliance where people voluntarily, return their high-capacity magazine. And Biden is just, first of all, he doesn't care whether the policy is effective or not. All he cares about is that the media likes it. The media says that he's doing the right thing at the right time. He's sending the right message, right? And that's really what matters to these people. Sending the right message is better than, giving a real solution. They know that there is no real solution, right? They can't change the way you or I feel about people that we don't like. Right? Only you can do that. Only you can make the decision to, not commit an act of violence that you have an impulse to do, or that maybe you're, line of work might force you to do if you're one of these organized crime members, in the audience. And, if you are one, then, you know, I'm not really trying to step on your toes either. But the truth is that, no, more firearms control, more attempts to reach your hand into the holster of people who already own firearms is not really a solution. They're talking about red flag laws, right? So that's really something that goes around the due process in the American justice system, right? If I'm accused of something, right, and in this case, it allows family members or friends to alert authorities and seek a court order against someone obtaining a firearm if they believe them to be a danger to themselves or others. Well, what if it's somebody who's abusing you, right? If that person's abusing you and they think that you might buy a firearm in order to defend yourself from them, and they say, oh, Darlene, she's out of her mind. She can't own a firearm. And this person who's reporting her is her husband, and this person abuses her daily, whether physically or verbally, or God forbid, in other ways, sexually. Yes, these red flag laws, conceivably, right, could be used in order to prevent somebody from protecting themselves from a tormentor who could report them. They're like, I'm not trying to go out here and say that these are things that are going to be common, but I'm saying that the contingency exists. That's one of the reasons that libertarianism tries to protect from excessive legal constraints against people's rights, even at the expense of sometimes allowing certain crimes to occur that might not be in the better interests of the community. But we know that the prosecution, the pursuance of those crimes might even be worse than the crimes themselves, right? Just like with prohibition, many people were thrown in jail over prohibition, and there were active attempts to, go above and beyond just arresting people just because of prohibition, just because the government said, well, it's not in the public health interest for people to be drinking. It's not in the public's moral interest to be drinking, and therefore we're going to restrict the commerce and production of alcohol so that people can't access it. Well, yeah, people started doing some pretty crazy shit, right? So some people started drinking wood alcohol, which led to their deaths. Sometimes they would die, sometimes they would go blind, all because the government decided, well, demon rum is too bad for these people, that we can't have a society that's so given over to alcoholism. So at a time when civil society could have taken it upon itself to try to educate people, get them to give up alcohol, they decided, no, it would be better if we would force the government to arrest people for selling or producing alcohol and things like that. That created the bootlegger era. It was a tremendous failure. And we've had similar failures concerning drugs. We've had similar failures concerning, firearms. Yeah, there's still many, many legal firearms. And unfortunately, I'm a pro-life person. Yes, there were people back when abortion was totally illegal who would perform back alley abortions. I happen to believe that making abortion illegal is a little bit different because you're talking about an act. You're not talking about a product, right? But even I would concede that if you make abortion illegal, it's not going to stop all of them. It might create some unsafe abortions. I think it is a dilemma. I think that there is a debate over whether it is correct to allow abortion to be legal or not. But, I see it as definitely, it's an infringement on the life of a patient, the child, when you abort the child. So really, we're talking about something like this happening, on the backdrop of a few unfortunate incidents. By the way, so I already mentioned the Colorado shooting. The suspect there was not really, according to the media profile, of being a white, right-wing focused male. Ended up being a Muslim person, I believe from Syria. And then there was the Atlanta shooting, which they did talk about. Oh, this is anti-Asian hate. Wasn't really too much evidence of that. This week there was another one in Frederick, Maryland, which I believe is well, I actually don't know where Frederick, Maryland is. So I do. Let me look it up on the map. So Frederick, Maryland, there was a naval petty officer. So it's neither in the Baltimore nor Washington D.C. area, but in any case, people have to be aware that it's a city that's in a very democratic state, actually a very democratic city as well. Baltimore and the rest of Maryland have very strict firearms control laws, and this notion that we're going to have to restrict the traffic and possession of firearms in order to keep the public safe. Well, no, this was a military serviceman. Things like this have happened before. He wounded two other naval servicemen, sailors, right? And we have to wait and see what the motive was. It was not one of the motives that the media loves. It would happen to be a guy who is, some sort of African descent, I believe. I don't know what origin that is. But the bottom line is that, no, we need to put this into perspective. Heavy gun control state, nevertheless, somebody who is not only capable of holding a weapon, but someone who is, within the defense industry, within the armed services, committed one of these acts, just like the Fort Hood massacre, right? You luckily had him stopped before he could kill more people. One of the people here appears to have been another minority person. So it's not as if this is like a person who's targeting only white people, right? So it's just a very tragic situation for all people involved, right? Whatever the race or ethnic background of the people, whatever the motivation of the shooter was. It's a horrible thing when somebody decides to, do something like this, right? And the idea that we're going to mix politics into it, I think, is a major problem. But I'm trying to say that I don't want this to be a political issue, but it's still a policy issue. You have heavy gun control in the state, and yet a mass shooting potentially did occur. It didn't end up being a mass shooting, but it well could have been. There was a shooting, I think, in 2018, but you also have, Annapolis, which is it's capital city of Maryland. You had this mass shooting just the past week, right? And that wasn't really reported because it wasn't really big above the local level. A lot of these shootings that happen are done with illegal guns. It's gang related activity, related to criminal enterprises. So you can't use some sort of, convoluted motive about nationalism and racism or whatever. Like people can't accept that the majority of crimes are committed for a very straightforward criminal motive concerning money, concerning greed. Because if they were to accept that, if they were to accept that people are inherently greedy, that people inherently want or spiteful or whatever, then they would realize that this notion that we're going to legislate away the problem is completely futile, right? So I believe that there was a a newspaper shooting. This was something that happened back in, yes, this was in 2018. And yeah, this was done with, first of all, so the perpetrator happened to be a black man, right? The perpetrator, in fact, I believe he was Hispanic, so check 2 boxes. And he had a grudge against Capital Gazette for reporting negative information about him. And he murdered 5 people. And he was arrested. So all of the standard boxes don't really get ticked, right? He did it with a 12 gauge Mossberg shotgun, right? So that's not an assault weapon, right? Nobody who's at the minimum educated about firearms would contend that it was an assault weapon. A shotgun is, if anything, the complete opposite of it, right? By the definition, you have to continue to, cycle the pump so that you can continue to use it. So all of these issues that we're talking about, they show that these people like Joe Biden, who, there's a famous get a shotgun moment, right? We could play the video. Maybe they have it on Rumble. So here we go. So this is the funny parody video.
I have 2 shotguns in my home. They're locked in a safe. There's a metal gun case. We live in an area that's wooded, somewhat secluded. And I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony and fire 2 blasts outside the house. Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun. You don't need a machine gun. You don't need 30 rounds. Buy a shotgun. Buy a double-barrel shotgun.
No, you don't need a flamethrower, and you don't need a tank, and you don't need an AR-15 to scare those thugs away. No, and I don't need a grenade launcher. I don't need an F-15. There's just one thing I need to do, and they'll stay away from me.
Fire 2 blasts outside the house. Buy a shotgun.
Buy a shotgun.
All right, well, you get the idea. So, no, you can commit. I don't know why he chose a shotgun, but he did, and he killed 5 people. So, and this guy would have been, completely he was in compliance with every federal law. So this notion that we're going to either, limit some of these weapons or limit all of them, it's just ridiculous. First of all, we have a constitution. This idea that, for the public good, we can just negate all, whatever we want, whatever we don't like, the bad speech, the bad weapons, the bad, personal property, right, in order to violate the Fifth Amendment, that if we went through all of these amendments and we'd change them in order to allow, society to make itself safer, that it would work is ridiculous, because we're all individuals. We all have individual vices and weaknesses and things that make us more, they make us more stressful, or they make us more resentful. So I want to say that, yeah, he's going to appoint a new ATF chief. He's going to try and just basically beat the drum of this for largely political reasons. The Democrats like to use firearms, like to use the prospect of an assault weapons ban in order to promote the notion that they're making America safer. I think most Americans are starting to wake up to the fact that their safety is a little bit more in their own hands. Remember that the people that are being accused of racism, are being accused of brutality, are being accused of all sorts of bias incidents and not being able to properly, de-escalate situations. The police, these are the people that the Democratic Party, the the neoliberals, the fake liberals, what I like to say, because they don't really believe in true philosophical liberalism, the classical liberalism, that they think that you should trust those people for safety while simultaneously blaming them for every ill in society, right? Police officers. I think police officers are humans. They need to be held accountable. But we shouldn't depend on them for everything. I think that they know that they're limited. And we should depend on ourselves for our own safety. And I can tell you, whoever this ATF chief is, whatever policy Biden is going to pursue, there is, I would say, a rippling throughout society, especially where I live, where people are starting to realize, no, I can't depend on police. I should own my own weapons. I should be able to. And if you can't own your own weapons, you should probably at least take self-defense classes. But that's a whole different issue. Eventually, I mean, one day I think they could end up trying to limit that if some incident happens. But, that's far from the future speculation. At the end of the day here, there's going to be a major backlash. It's already started. Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona, right? Somebody with a mixed record among conservatives, but he's said, we're signing a Second Amendment Freedom Act protecting the state from federal gun laws. And that's something that people are going to have to contend with. If the federal government can't get cooperation from local authorities concerning gun crime, concerning some of these new laws, then the laws don't necessarily matter, right? Just like there were sanctuary cities for immigration, which Republicans hated. And by the way, I would say I agree. I don't think that there should be sanctuary cities for illegal aliens who could potentially be, I don't know, they could be spies from other countries, right? They could be criminals. They could be sex traffickers and things like that. I don't think that there should be sanctuary cities for that. At the same time, I do think that there's a difference when you do a sanctuary city for firearms. It's very simple. There is no amendment in the Constitution that says you can come here without permission, without documentation, without a visa or any other reason to be here, right? But there is a Second Amendment, right? So we're talking about two different standards here. The states want to protect the Second Amendment. The federal government is trying to infringe on it. Therefore, a sanctuary city, at least on a conceptual level, is, it's worth thinking about. I would support it personally if it came down to it for my area. But even without the sanctuary cities, people are. I believe that there are more people than ever who will probably say, "No, I don't care if there's a law. I'm going to keep it." Just like when they made marijuana legal, it's not like people came for, "Oh, I guess I'm not going to smoke a joint anymore." When they made LSD illegal, I'm not going to drop acid. Things like that. It's just not the way people think. People want to do what they want to do. The way to get them to stop doing things that are counter to their own personal health is to counsel them, maybe make an argument, maybe tell them why they shouldn't be doing this activity if we're talking about drug use. Whether you're talking about weapons, I don't think that you should necessarily, butt into people's lives. If they're not doing any crimes with these weapons, then it's not necessarily your problem. The real concern here is getting them to safely store them, safely use them, make sure that they're out of the reach of people who would use them to harm other people, and encourage responsible use. I was even listening today. I believe I've started to look at two people as sort of the bookends of the ideological spectrum that I generally listen to, although I listen to many different people. But Ron Paul of the libertarian side, I listen to his podcast at least a few times a week. And Alan Dershowitz, the liberal, who I listen to whenever I can get a chance. And in closing, I think, obviously I agree very much with Ron Paul. I'm probably, close to 100% on his side. Alan Dershowitz, I don't understand his argument. He says, "Oh, I don't really think you have a right to bear arms. I think that there should be a well-regulated militia." And he starts to go into his whole thing about how, the public has a right to be safe from firearms and from people who would do you harm from firearms. But it just isn't true in every stage of our society. And this isn't a good thing, but we've always had murderers. We've always had people, like, remember, in the Wild West, there were cattle rustlers. It didn't matter that cattle rustling was illegal. And those cattle rustlers usually were bearing arms, right? You always had people who were committing crimes at every stage of our development, because this is a developing society. It always will be a developing society. The only time when we'll ever reach the end of our development, unfortunately, will probably be when society completely breaks down and develops into disintegration, unfortunately. So Alan Dershowitz is wrong. And I think the one thing that I took from his explanation about it, one of his explanations, because he's continuously reacting to his statements of, reacting to other people's reactions to his statements, is that, yes, he knows that he doesn't believe in the Second Amendment. He doesn't believe that people have the right to bear arms. But he recognizes as a constitutional scholar that the Second Amendment exists, that the precedent and all of the different legal frameworks that exist because of past cases, like McDonald versus Chicago, I think it's Heller versus D.C., all of those different court cases and precedents, he has a hard time getting over them. He knows that unless you change the Constitution, we're not likely to see firearms restrictions be expanded to the degree that liberals like him want, because the Constitution simply doesn't agree with him, right? The Supreme Court's interpretation of it doesn't agree with him. And Alan Dershowitz is one of the most recognized legal scholars in America in the past 50 years. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Maybe went a little bit too long, but what the hell? We don't get to talk that much anymore, do we? Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to the newsletter below. Subscribe to me on Odyssey. Tip me on Subscribestar if you want. BitChute, definitely subscribe there. I love the numbers on BitChute usually. You can find me on Rumble and also on Minds and Gab if you just want to chat or post with me. And have a great night. Also, you can, by the way, find me on Telegram at razorsharpreport. And I'll probably add an icon soon. See you later.